Antonelli, 41, points clear of Hamilton. F1 2026, title race. Explained at the start of this season, nobody saw this coming. Not Mercedes, not Ferrari, and definitely not Lewis Hamilton. A 19-year-old rookie was supposed to be learning the ropes, finding his feet, surviving his first year in Formula One. Instead, he's leading the World Championship by 41 points. And the man behind him isn't just any driver. It's a 7-time world champion, a man with more Grand Prix wins than anyone in history. So how did this happen? How did Kimi Antonelli turn a rookie season into a title assault that's left the entire paddock stunned? This is the story of a championship nobody predicted, and a battle that's far from over. Let's go back to the beginning. When the 2026 season opened, the conversation wasn't about Antonelli at all. It was about Hamilton's first full year at Ferrari. After a difficult debut season in red, this was supposed to be the year everything clicked. The year the partnership finally delivered. Pundits spent the winter debating whether Hamilton could rediscover the form that made him the most decorated driver in the sport's history, now wrapped in red instead of silver. Antonelli, meanwhile, was treated as a project. A talented kid thrown into a brutal sport, expected to make mistakes, expected to need time. He was the youngest driver on the grid, stepping into one of the most scrutinized seats in Formula One. And the assumption was simple: rookies stumble before they run. Nobody wrote championship contender next to his name. In fact, most preseason predictions had Antonelli finishing somewhere in the midfield, perhaps stealing the occasional points finish if the car cooperated and the learning curve wasn't too brutal. Comparisons to other rookies who had struggled in their first seasons were everywhere. The story being told about him was one of patience, not ambition. But somewhere between Miami and Monaco, the story flipped completely. By round 4 in Miami, Antonelli already sat at 100 points, 20 clear of his own teammate George Russell. Hamilton wasn't even second, he was 5th with 51 points, still searching for his footing in a new red car. The teenager wasn't just surviving, he was setting the pace, weekend after weekend, while the rest of the grid scrambled to catch up. That alone should have been a warning sign. But what came next is where the real story begins. Monaco was the moment everything changed. Antonelli took pole position, then delivered a flawless drive through a chaotic red-flagged Grand Prix that saw 7 cars retire. Verstappen was gone at the start. Norris was gone. Leclerc crashed out. Through all of it, Antonelli never blinked. It was his 5th win in a row. And it didn't just hurt his rivals. It devastated his own teammate. Russell, who many believed was Mercedes' real title hope this year, finished the race outside the points after a late drive, through penalty. His own words afterward said it all. It's 2 races in a row. Could have won the race last week. Could have maybe been P3 to P4 today. It's 40 points down the drain for things outside of my control. That night in Monaco, Antonelli's lead in the championship swelled to 66 points. 66, over a 7-time world champion and his own highly rated teammate combined. It looked for a moment like the title race might already be over. Then came Barcelona, and suddenly there was a crack in the armor. For the first time all season, Antonelli failed to start from the front row in qualifying. Russell took pole. Hamilton lined up alongside him. And on race day, Ferrari rolled the dice with an aggressive 3-stop strategy that played out perfectly. Hamilton surged through the field, picked off the long stints ahead of him, and crossed the line for his first win in nearly 2 years, his maiden victory in Ferrari red. After everything that had been said about his start to life at Maranello, it was the result the entire team had been waiting for. But the headline wasn't just Hamilton's win, it was what happened behind him. On lap 62 of 66, with the championship leader still on track, Antonelli's car failed him. A retirement, his first DNF of the season, arriving at the worst possible moment. In one afternoon, Hamilton clawed back 25 points. The gap that had stood at 66 dropped to 41. It was the most significant shift of the season, and it raised a question nobody had been asking until then. Is this rookie's dream season finally cracking under pressure? So why has Hamilton struggled to close the gap faster? The honest answer is adaptation. A new team, a new car, a new way of working. None of that happens overnight, even for a driver with Hamilton's resume. Ferrari's pace has been competitive, but inconsistent. Some weekends the car has matched Mercedes. Others, it's been a step behind. Engineers at Maranello have spent the year fine-tuning a car that, on paper, should be capable of fighting for wins every weekend. But translating that potential into results has taken longer than anyone in red wanted to admit. There's also the matter of starting position. For most of the season, Hamilton simply hasn't had the qualifying pace to put himself in position to fight for wins on Saturday. Barcelona worked because of a bold strategic gamble. not because Ferrari outqualified Mercedes outright. Without that kind of strategic intervention, Hamilton has too often found himself racing forward through the field rather than defending a lead. And then there's the psychological weight of it. Chasing a teenager in a title race is not the script anyone wrote for a 7-time champion. Every press conference becomes a referendum on whether the magic is still there. Every retirement for Antonelli gets framed as Hamilton's opportunity, and every Hamilton podium gets framed as proof he can still do it. That kind of scrutiny would weigh on anyone, let alone a driver adjusting to a brand new team in the most watched seat in the sport. Which brings us to the other side of this story. Why is Antonelli succeeding at all? Start with the obvious. Pace. It on the calendar is not something that can be taught overnight. It either exists in a driver or it doesn't, and right now it clearly exists in Antonelli. That trust between driver and engineer is often the difference between a good season and a great one. And right now, it's working in Antonelli's favor far more than it's working against him. Mercedes have built their entire season around protecting and developing that relationship, even as Russell pushes back against the idea that the team is favoring his teammate. So where does this leave the championship? 41 points with 15 rounds remaining is significant, but it is not insurmountable. It's the equivalent of roughly 1.5 race wins. In a sport where mechanical failures, safety cars, and strategy gambles can swing a weekend in seconds, that gap can shrink fast, just as it did in Barcelona. History is full of championships that looked settled in June and were blown wide open by August. For Mercedes, the situation is more complicated than outsiders might assume. Their own driver lineup is now fighting itself almost as much as it's fighting Ferrari. Russell sits third, 68 points off his teammate, and that frustration isn't going away quietly. Team orders, if they ever become necessary, would be an explosive conversation inside a garage that has tried all year to insist both drivers are free to race. For Ferrari, Barcelona was proof of concept, proof that when everything aligns, strategy, pace, and a mistake from the leader, they can close the gap in a single afternoon. The challenge now is repeating that formula without relying on a mechanical failure from the other side of the garage they're chasing. For Antonelli, the challenge now shifts. It's no longer about announcing himself to the sport. It's about handling pressure he's never experienced before, leading a championship as a teenager, with a 7-time champion closing in behind him. Every gap in the calendar between now and the next race will be filled with questions about whether Barcelona was a blip or the beginning of a slide. So what happens next? 15 races remain. Different circuits, different demands, different chances for fortunes to swing. High-speed power tracks that could favor Ferrari's engine. Street circuits where one mistake ends a weekend. Long, punishing races where reliability becomes just as important as raw pace. Each of those variables could tip the balance one way or the other before the season is anywhere close to finished. Antonelli has proven he can win when everything goes right. The real test now is whether he can manage the weekends when things go wrong, because Barcelona showed exactly what happens when they do. A reliability issue at the wrong moment, a strategy gamble that doesn't go his way, a single off weekend, and the gap he's built could disappear faster than it took to create. Hamilton, meanwhile, has shown in one race exactly what he's capable of when the conditions align. The only question is whether Ferrari can give him those conditions consistently, race after race, for the rest of the season. If they can find even a fraction more pace on a Saturday, the calculus of this title fight changes completely. 41 points. 15 rounds. A teenager defending a lead he was never supposed to have against a champion who refuses to fade quietly. The 2026 title race isn't decided, it's just getting started. And the only question left is this: can Kimi Antonelli hold off Lewis Hamilton for an entire season? Or was Barcelona just the first crack in a story too good to be true? Whatever the answer turns out to be, this much is already certain. A 19-year-old has forced the most successful driver the sport has ever seen to fight for every single point. That alone makes 2026 a season worth remembering, regardless of how the final standings read in December.